All right, we'll go ahead and call ourselves to order. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Tony.
We can start with approval of our agenda for the day, which we can do by consensus as presented. Is there anything that we need to change or adjust on the agenda that you see? Hearing none, agenda is approved as presented. Then we'll take a motion for approval of the February 6th meeting minutes from someone who was present at that meeting.
Motion.
We have a motion from David. Is there a second?
I second.
Second from Monica. Thank you. So that is to approve the minutes as presented. Are there any corrections necessary to those minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes from February as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, that motion carries. Those minutes are approved. Thank you. That brings us to the public invitation portion of our meeting for interested persons to address the commission on items that weren't on our agenda. Do we have anyone registered this month?
We do not.
Okay, a reminder, you can always email staff to get on that list for next time if you wish. So then our business item for the day is the long-range plan for the Midtown Greenway Regional Trail for the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board. We have Colin and Zoe, go ahead.
All right. This is Zoe's first business item in front of the committee.
Go easy on me.
We should have cookies or something.
I should have brought cookies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Chair, Council Member, and Commissioners. I'm Colin Kelly, Planning Analyst, and I'm joined by Zoe Mock, our Trails Planner, and we're here to present the Midtown Greenway Regional Trail Long Range Plan on behalf of Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, also known as MPRB. We should note that Madeline Hudek, MPRB Project Manager and Data Insights Analyst, and Adam Arvidsson, Director of Strategic Planning, are both here today and may respond to questions at the end of this presentation as needed. So, the Midtown Greenway, as many of you know, is located centrally in the Regional Parks and Trails system. It's in the southeast part of Hennepin County and in the east central part of the city of Minneapolis. The trail was added to the Regional Parks and Trails system as part of the 2020 system additions process and is currently considered a regional trail search corridor until the long-range plan is adopted. The long-range plan we're presenting today focuses on 11 amenity zones along the trail corridor. The corridor extends from Cedar Lake Regional Trail and Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park to the west, to Mississippi Gorge Regional Park and West River Parkway to the east. Currently, Met Council-led planning efforts are exploring an expansion of the trail over the Mississippi River, but that work is still very much in its early stages at this point. The figures on this slide are figures 1 through 3 in the staff report. For folks who are familiar with the Midtown Greenway, you know that this is an existing trail, and so the boundaries are generally already established. However, the long-range plan recognizes the expansion over the Mississippi River is a possibility as part of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Trail Expansion Project. Future ownership of any trail extension is to be determined. Most of the existing Midtown Greenway is on land that is owned by the Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority, or HCRA, who is one of the two primary operators of the trail, along with the city of Minneapolis. The trail boundary includes 5 park areas that are immediately adjacent to the trail, including the mall, Sioux Line Garden, CPRO site, the ramp connecting to Brackett Park, and a small part of West River Parkway at the eastern end of the trail. These parks include many existing and planned future amenities for Midtown Greenway users, including seating, shade, public art, and more. 2 parcels were identified as future acquisition sites. The first is a 0.55 acre area located on the north side of the Greenway, adjacent to West River Parkway in East 26th Street. It is currently owned by the city of Minneapolis and could provide a new access point to the trail from the north side. This area is shown in figure 11 of the staff report. The second proposed acquisition area is a 5.02 acre parcel on the east side of Hiawatha Avenue next to the Sabo Bridge. The parcel is currently owned by the Metropolitan Council and contains a portion of the existing Midtown Greenway Trail, along with the connection to the Hiawatha LRT Trail. If site control is obtained by MPRB, this land may provide an opportunity to create an expanded amenity zone and additional park features. This area is shown in figure 14 of the staff report. Formal appraisals have not yet been completed for either area at this time, and there is currently no timeline for acquisition. Getting into public and partner engagement. Dating back as far as 1999, the public has been engaged on planning for the Midtown Greenway Trail Corridor specifically, as well as plans that include parks and trails in this part of Minneapolis more generally for many years. From the Lake Street Midtown Greenway Corridor Framework Plan in 1999 to the Greenways Alternative Analysis in 2014 and Lake Street Recovery in 2022, people on and around the Greenway have been engaged on topics related to the corridor time and time again, and the long-range plan before you seeks to honor and elevate those voices. MPRB also conducted engagement specifically for this plan, which I'll be highlighting in the next slide. From a partner engagement perspective, it's worth mentioning again the three agencies who do and will play critical roles in the future of the Greenway. That is the City of Minneapolis, Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority, and MPRB. To clearly identify roles and responsibilities between these agencies, a cooperative agreement focused on ownership, operations, and use of regional funding was developed and includes provisions to update the agreement regularly. In addition to a great deal of coordination with the city and HICRA, MPRB also organized and implemented a project advisory committee, a technical advisory committee, and an operations work group, each of whom informed the development of the long-range plan in the fall of 2022 through the submittal of the plan to the council in late 2024. Before the plan was submitted to the council, it was adopted by the MPRB Board of Commissioners on December 4th, 2024, with support from the Midtown Greenway Coalition. The board resolution and Midtown Greenway Coalition's letter of support are attachments 1 and 2 in the staff report. The Midtown Greenway serves as a vital connection within a diverse community, spanning a wide range of ethnicities and economic backgrounds. According to the long-range plan, 42% of the adjacent neighborhood's area population is between 25 and 45 years of age. People of color make up 47% of the area's population, and 29% speak a language other than English. Additionally, 18% live below the poverty line. When compared to Minneapolis as a whole, it's clear that the areas along the Greenway are more diverse, with larger percentages of people of color, non-English speakers, and people that live below the poverty line, along with people that do not own a car, with the central portion of the corridor showing the most diversity. The draft plan was shared online using an online survey in Spanish, Somali, and English, and printed copies were distributed to area recreation centers. Lawn signs also encourage plan review and comment. In addition, Somali and Spanish language focus groups were hosted by the Midtown Greenway Coalition. Additional engagement included slow roll bike rides, online open houses, and direct outreach to neighborhood organizations. Major themes coming out of this engagement included safety improvements such as lighting, staffing, cameras, and maintenance, as well as adding more trail amenities. As a result of engagement, additional amenity zones were added. Additional funding for more low-cost amenities were added to the cost estimate for each amenity zone, and the plan's guiding principles were expanded to support design and implementation. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Zoe.
All right, thank you, Colin. So moving on to the development concept, this plan involves the development of 11 key amenity zones along the corridor, and we have those amenity zones broken up into 2 slides here. So starting from the west, we have amenity zones at West Lake, the Mall, Nicollet Avenue and First Avenue South, Fifth Avenue South, and the CPRO site. To highlight a few of these amenity zones, the Mall is a 5-block park just east of the chain of lakes, which has an adopted plan in place to incorporate new amenities and add green space while improving access to the Midtown Greenway. Moving east, the Nicollet and First project, known to some as the Kmart project or New Nicollet, will reconnect Nicollet Avenue where there was a former Kmart building. The city has developed plans for a mixed-use area, including housing, retail, and new park space. This will be a great connection for the Midtown Greenway. Finally, the CPRO site, a space that formerly housed CPRO grain elevators, has been revamped into a park space with an additional improvements slotted for 2027. Moving on to the central to eastern portion of the corridor, we have amenity zones included at Bloomington Avenue, East 28th Street, Hiawatha Avenue, Brackett Field, and West River Parkway. Digging in deeper here, we're highlighting the Hiawatha Avenue amenity zone, which NPRB is exploring some acquisition of land from the Met Council, as Colin mentioned, just east of the Sabo Bridge to add additional amenities and space to the corridor. At West River Parkway, an additional land acquisition is being explored to add additional access to the Midtown Greenway from the northern side of the trails and neighborhoods north of the trail. And also of note here is that the Midtown Greenway Trail Expansion Planning Project will eventually extend the Greenway across the Mississippi and into St. Paul. Looking at the estimated costs for the project, the total estimated development and improvement cost associated is $2,469,100 with an average of $120,100 per amenity zone. Along the corridor, also as Colin had mentioned, there is acquisition of 2 parcels proposed, though formal appraisals have not been completed at this time. And finally, just noting that any operations of the amenity zones I just described on land not owned by MPRB will be the responsibility of other agencies as outlined in the cooperative agreement. The rationale for proposed action is the Midtown Greenway Regional Trail Long Range Plan is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, specifically Chapter 5, Strategy 1, and other council policies as included in Thrive MSP 2040. It is important to note here that we use the 2040 plan for review since the long range plan was submitted ahead of the adoption of Imagine 2050. So the proposed action before you is that the Metropolitan Council approve Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's Midtown Greenway Regional Trail Long Range Plan and require MPRB prior to initiating any construction to send preliminary plans to the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services Interceptor Engineering Assistant Manager. Just a bit of a mess. So with that, we'll stand for any questions and remind you that staff members from MPRB here are here as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm sure we're gonna have a few questions on this, commissioners. Is this the one you have questions on, or you have questions on our other thing?
The other thing, well,
Okay.
I'll ask a question. So all the pictures show people bicycling. Does anybody walk?
Yes. It's a multi-use corridor, so it's used for many different purposes.
But I just don't see anybody walking. It looks like it's all paved. So there isn't really a walkable surface.
I will just point out, excuse me, Zoe,
Yeah.
Chair Commissioners, if you look at the line to the left, there is a corridor that is dedicated to pedestrians. You know,
For all
so
5.9 miles?
yes,
Oh, good.
the-
And now I see it.
oh, that's
under-
better.
Under the bridge, sort of.
Yeah. I will say the involvement of the park board will, I think, over time, make this a more accessible and safe trail, so. That's opinion, I mean, I think it's fact too, but.
So this looks like the entire length of it has some separation by painted lines within the paved part, but then there's also at least some parts that are dual treadway with a natural surface, but not all the way through, depending on
No,
streets.
there's actually, I think, a fence between the 2 corridors, most of the space. So it's not, that person happens to be riding in the pedestrian area.
Yeah.
There's a violation going on right here.
Oops.
But
Okay, so while in this picture you can see a little bit going off on the left side, most of the way that's not actually accessible like
That
that.
soft surface is just a path of desire,
Yeah, okay.
you know, and walkers that are there, that they will often use.
Good, because I would assume in this very urbanized area that walkers might go to work, shopping,
People,
wherever
I
they
mean,
need to go.
there are a significant number of walkers and I think, you know, one of the, in the plan, if you look at the way the plan is laid out and they talk about these amenity zones, you know, I think that those will really be important because I think that sometimes it feels like a throughway for cyclists. I think in reality, it often feels like a throughway for cyclists. But with these improvements, one of the things they do that's really important is they create more points of entry that give you a reason to be at that place. If that makes sense, you know, and so it really enhances placemaking in a real way because it creates these shorter, connected experiences for people that are actually on the Greenway versus longer, you know, experiences that actually seem to really accommodate the kind of the mindset of biking. But I think the changes that they're proposing and you're absolutely right, Em, and I think the park board, even the presence of the park board as a partner and the planning of it, like energetically it feels different in community and the way the community sees it as well. But there's a lot of pressure to make it to enhance what's happening on the Midtown Greenway.
I see we had a staff person join us, so you have something to say.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Madeline Hudek, and I was one of the project managers for this. Chair Yarusa and commissioners, I just wanted to clarify in the picture here, there's the paved trail portion and then there's also kind of that grassy portion there, for lack of a technical term here. The grassy kind of portion of the trail, like next to the paved trail, is not included in the regional trail boundary. Just want to make sure you all are aware of that.
Okay.
The regional trail boundary is, in at least what's pictured here, is just going to be roughly what you see as kind of that paved segment through here. And there are portions of the Greenway where it has kind of this grassy area, and it's generally right here heading west. And none of that is included within the regional trail boundary. And that's because the PICRA, the Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority, which is the underlying landowner in this space, does still have an interest in potentially seeing this area as a transportation corridor. And so while it's not determined where, if they are going to have transportation through this area in the future, generally the understanding is that it would maybe be kind of in that southern portion. So we didn't include that within the regional trail boundary with the idea that hopefully the trail will continue to kind of be in its current state, even if transportation were to go through within this corridor. Transportation other than biking and walking, of course.
Right, so the corridor is sized generally for 2 tracks, and we're talking about probably ending up at some point having 1 track and 1 as regional trail potentially. Possibly, yeah.
When you look at the maps within the regional trail plan document, you'll maybe notice that there's sort of a limer green color, and that's the regional trail boundary portion, and then there's sort of a darker green color that's generally on the south side, and that's showing where the corridor exists, but it's that land that PICRA has, but we aren't including in the boundary.
But the kind of, the double track width basically exists throughout the whole thing.
For the most part, yes.
Almost, yeah. David?
Yeah, I just, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but, you know, these 11 amenity zones, I guess, could you just repeat if you already said it, like, is there kind of a basic list of what amenities could be added? I mean, is it more like along the lines of access points, so it's like paving and those kinds of things, wayfinding signs, or is it actually like, you know, is there gonna be like drinkable water or other things?
Chair Yaruso and Commissioner Yates, We do on page 45 in the plan document have a list of what those possible amenities might be. And they include things like benches and bike racks, drinking fountains, some of those like basic amenities that would really kind of be nice to have when you're along a trail. And with the amenity zones that we selected throughout the corridor, we tried to kind of space them out in such a way that when these things do get added, and some of them do exist. There are a couple of these locations where there are some benches and some trash cans and things like that that are in some of these spots. But when we add some additional amenities, hopefully it'll make it more enjoyable for people.
Yeah, and I'll just comment that I've been on the Greenway for many years, and I have seen it improve, and it feels much nicer today than it did a while ago, and I think further amenities would probably help in that effort, I would agree.
Other commissioners?
I just have curious, I should know this, but who pays for the maintenance of the trails like these ones?
Yeah, that was my question. Yeah, I was actually trying to get the same thing, because I know there's a couple of different things going on here, like this is bringing up largely small scale investments in some new amenities, but like long term, like if we get to the point where the actual pavement has to be replaced, who does that, and is that an eligible cost for regional funds or not? How does that work?
You want me to?
Yeah, you take it
Okay.
first. And I
All
can follow.
Chair Uruso, Commissioner Dillenberg, for this very kind of unique regional trail, the park board is involved, the HICRA, the underlying landowner, and then the city of Minneapolis. And kind of before the park board got involved as part of this planning effort, HICRA and the city had in place an agreement in terms of who's kind of maintaining the trail and kind of keeping it up in sort of its current form. And that agreement will continue to exist moving forward. It's actually in the cooperative agreement that the park board entered into with the city and with HICRA. One of the exhibits is that existing agreement that they have. So to answer your question, yes, more succinctly, the pavement is, I think, largely the city's responsibility in the current agreement that the city and HICRA have, and it will continue to be that way for anything that is not owned by the park board. But for any of those paved areas, like at the CPRO site where there's some trails kind of going down to the main trail there, since that's on parkland, that would be something that we would be able to use regional dollars on, as far as I understand, because that's an eligible use.
Okay. So then probably to your part, while that's their current arrangement, if they wanted to change that arrangement at any point, would the main corridor portion be eligible for regional funds or no? If it's still underlying
That
land
might be
ownership with HICRA?
I'm happy to take that on, and this is something that the park board and council staff have met numerous times to just sort of hash out the arrangement. But the way, it's clear that if the park board and the city and HICRA ever wanted to transfer operation of the trail to the park board, that would be fine. And then that would open up the entire corridor to regional funding, but that is not the current arrangement as it's spelled out in that long joint powers agreement. So
So it is just tied to operation, not land ownership?
yeah, what we're calling site control, which can be land ownership, but it also could be an easement or it could be some sort of other agreement.
Got it, okay. Yes,
I
Tess?
came a little late, so maybe you said this already, but will you be adding in more like entry points onto the greenway? Or is it just using the pre-existing entry points and we're just adding more amenities to all of these entry points or exit points?
Thanks, Commissioner. There are some added access points, so the Kmart site, for example, the new Nicolette project it's called, there will be an added access, but to some parts of the trail, there will just be added amenities to the existing.
I think as somebody who lives in this area and as a woman, I don't normally walk this greenway because it hasn't always been a place that's felt super safe. So more entry points, I think, would just bring in more people, like pedestrians walking and less of just kind of like people using bikes. I love all of the amenities being added, cause I think that will also start to bring people in and maybe give them a little bit more of an option to stay a little bit longer and have access to water and different things like that. But more foot traffic in this area would be fantastic. And I love that, old Kmart area is just kind of a cement slab right now, and it would be great to start to see something greener and a little bit more life happening in that area, so, yeah.
As someone not familiar with this area, when Cecily was asking about walkers, and I was seeing in here that it refers to the trench for the train, I have to imagine that this has a certain amount of physical separation from the neighborhoods that are right next to it, so like you might be 100 yards away, but not really able to get down there except at a couple of places, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
And-
100 feet.
Like what are
Yeah,
those,
it's pretty far down, it's in the trench, for
Like-
sure.
It is a barrier for sure.
are there like stairs in places, or is it kind of only when it goes to a major grade crossing with a street or something?
I think there's ramps down, I don't know of any stairways, but, I mean, there's definitely access points. It would be, as a walker, it'd be great if there were even more to each of the bridges, but if there was more amenities, I think that would be nice. And like you said, it's gotten better over the years, more recently, it's a little bit nicer, people definitely use it more, I think now, so.
I think we're still suffering from COVID and from post-uprising. It's not, I mean, I think in terms of perception of safety, you know what I mean?
True.
I think that's really, and
I just think more people, I think, is safer than
Yeah.
less
Yeah,
people,
no,
you know?
but that's what I'm saying, I mean, I think that pushed people away, and really, the Greenway is a different reality, and between Fifth, or even between Nicollet and 20th, right, is very different than 20th to the river or Nicollet to the lakes, right? I mean, and I think that, part of that is that that is the lowest median household income. It's the most diverse area. It also is designed differently. You can already see, even from a design perspective, how the terraces and the new housing that has gone in west of Nicollet, I mean, it looks different, right?
Yeah.
In terms of how it's being designed. And so I think part of the energy of this, and I think, let me say, as someone who's there often, and who talks to the park board often, I feel like as a community, our pressure is that we want the park board as a partner to design it more like a park, to think about it as a place that people will be, right? Rather than HICRA, I think in the city of Minneapolis do treat it like a street.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like there's something, and even right now, I know Madeline is getting calls from people, in our neighborhood to go, we wanna program CPRO Park, right? So all of a sudden, we're programming the CPRO Park and we're doing plays and we're doing things that give people a reason to feel very differently about it. And I don't know from just as far as we live there, Chicago Avenue is ground zero, right? And it's crazy.
I live right over there.
Right, you know what I'm saying? Like so the hotel's gotta come back
Yeah.
to life, right? CPRO Park is gonna be activated, the bike shop is back. You know what I mean? We've gotta take back the ramp from Nicollet Avenue, that's also crazy town,
Yeah,
right?
I don't go down there that.
No, you don't, and you shouldn't, you better not, right? I mean, I think that's how the community feels about it. So there are points of entry that we don't feel safe on the points of entry. It's not even the Greenway, right? And so I think that the plan, and I think that the park board as the partner gets to those things around programming, around intention, around what's happening, and I think we'll see, I really do think the areas that we're talking about will feel interesting, and we'll see a change, but I do think that I think that the idea, and what I was gonna ask is like in terms of counts, as the park board looks at the funding and those things, how does that play into the regional park system? Because the Greenway, that changes a lot of things, in some regards. And is that important? Is that important for us? Because I think it also speaks to the trail system as the regional parks develop the trail system and continue to do that. The other thing coming online is the missing link. I mean, you know, we kind of, how is that gonna play out? And is there an opportunity for us, you know, as we think, again, to look at the way our trail system is organized and how we plan together, you know, and develop our broader network, you know?
So what I'm trying to think of in my head is get a sense of comparison to some previous stuff we had heard from Minneapolis Park and Rec Board a few years ago. And was talking to us, I wanna say it was for Above the Falls, maybe, where there was an area that was just physically grade separated from neighborhoods, so it was something that had been park, was operated as park, but was just difficult for people to interact with because of just topography. And it sounds like here we have some of the same thing, but more of it is like cultural and economic and other sorts of realities that are different from just, can you really walk down into it? So there's maybe some lessons to be learned from what they previously did about getting access, but a lot of new challenges too, right? Is that accurate?
Chair Russo, I would just add that you may be referring to the Samuel Morgan Regional Trail and the wider part of that corridor that is in Lower Town, St. Paul, and the separation between the bluff area on top and the area down below, which creates a great challenge for people to get from the communities on top down to the space
Oh, this was
down below.
one of the parks along the Mississippi River, I forget which, because there's like 3 in a row, and they were doing some stuff about just neighborhood access, including a bunch of just wayfinding several blocks away, and it was integrating things into the community outside of just the park boundary. It's like there was the park itself, and then there was a whole thing going several blocks away. There was a plan of how do we get people more connected to this resource that's right next to them, and some things going on with that. It had some similarities to the trench idea, but it sounds like the trench is only one of several concerns. So, yes, David.
You know, just a thought here, but, and maybe this is along the same idea as like intention, but if truly the land that we're talking about is just that paved areas, in a way it's too bad because, you know, there's that space that's in between, if you go back to that slide that's got the shot of the violation. Yes, infamous. You know, there is all that space down there, and I wonder, you know, if you bike down this, what you see is it's very urban. You know, you're underneath bridges, the concrete's got cracking. There's some grittiness to the area that is just something that you know, that's part of maybe that's part of the charm too. But it occurs to you that as a bicyclist, that tends to be the purpose. Like you're going through it, so you're really just transiting. If the intention is to have more use and have more people, walkers and so forth coming down there, maybe you need to talk to Hikra to see if you can, if they're just sitting on it and not gonna do anything with that, maybe there's some community gardens or something that can go in that space, or maybe it's toxic and you know, whatever, I don't know, but maybe there's some other use that can be by the side of that bike trail so that there's reason for community members to come down there and kind of be there. I agree with Tess on, you know, that's part of the safety issue is you get more people and it's more safe, and that will spur more use and so on. It kind of builds upon itself.
Yeah, so not necessarily like additional infrastructure as what are some low-cost beautification kind of things.
Right.
So I can say, this is actually a little bit unusual compared to previous things we've seen with regional rail corridors, most of which are in Hennepin County, in that a lot of them don't have hardly any development at all. There's several that are managed through Three Rivers where it's gravel or crushed limestone surface instead of paved, because they're essentially saying, we're not going to invest any money in something that might get ripped up. So the idea that they're splitting this and saying, we are having pavement because we're saying we can probably get away with only using half of what we have here is different. And so we already have a higher level of amenity than we typically see on these reserved for possible future light rail or whatever kinds of corridors. Yeah, if it's as simple as a little bit of planting flowers, that kind of thing, you might be able to do that and make a difference. But certainly we don't expect to see a lot happening there because in similar places elsewhere, it's even less than this.
Yeah.
Because of that, well, it might just go away. Yes, Anthony?
Well, okay, so I get to talk to him, Craig. The thing, like what Madeline said is really, their language is very specific. They don't want you to do anything that could potentially prohibit the future placement of a train. Well, I'll say a train, or whatever, the transportation. And so they're not, they're really clear about that. So areas where we're talking about, and there are plans, as a matter of fact, there are plans for 5 murals that will go on the Midtown Greenway between 20th and Nicollet. Like right now, those plans, I think they just shared the artist's work, there's 5 locations for it, they'll be there. There is plan for additional pollinator path. I'm just saying, I think there are plans for that, and I think you should really realize this is a very highly used corridor. That's the other thing, let's say, we talk about it as perception of safety and or unsafe or it's crazy town, but this is really a very heavily used corridor.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be the most heavily used corridor, in the system, in all of our system, and
Both for transit and exercise.
yeah, I really, is there
Hardwood
a
Creek,
3-mile stretch that has more use? A 2-mile stretch?
They even get
Maybe
snowmobiles.
somewhere on the Grand Rounds?
Yeah.
Maybe somewhere else on the Grand Rounds, the place is closest to the Midtown Greenway probably. You know what I mean? And so I think the other thing is that this is this is a really critical piece of the system relative to transportation as well. And the Grand Rounds with this piece is an amazing connector for our entire city. Like with just the Midtown Greenway and the Grand Rounds, you can do the Mill District, Chain of Lakes, the river, you can do Minnehaha Falls, you can connect, and you can jump on the Three Rivers system at that point out, you know what I mean? It really is, and so I just wanna say that I think this is a grade A piece of infrastructure for us. It is highly and heavily used. This change in terms of this idea of the way that they're gonna read the design, and it is a very great strategic move for community that MPRB is going to be managing this and having their name on it, and whatever comes of this relative to how they use funds and those things will be really good for community. And I think there is a very clear intention to make the entire stretch of it as beautiful and as peaceful and as the eastern western sections of it. But it really is, and if you haven't been on it, and maybe that's a trip, it is an amazing stretch. I mean, people like around the country come to visit the Midtown Greenway. Every planner that comes to the Twin Cities makes a personal phone call to these guys to go see the Midtown Greenway.
But it's a bicycle trail.
And that's the challenge. I mean, it really is. That's what I said. It's viewed as a throughway in some regards for cyclists. It is primarily seen as a bicycle trail, and I think that the changes they're making will begin to really enhance that.
Well, I would hope so, because if I wanted to go for a long walk in that area, I might as well walk on city streets.
You know what, if
You know,
you're
it's
feeling
paved.
brave, I think you would be better served walking that 2.6 miles in the Midtown Greenway.
But see, I like to go out for 15, 20-mile hikes, and I am not gonna do it all on pavement. That kills your shins.
Well, and that also to some extent, I do see you, Jess. That does somewhat fall under, we've acknowledged before that not everything in our system does everything the same. So it may be that if you want a paved experience, you go here, and if you want an unpaved experience, maybe you just go somewhere else.
I'd walk on city streets, yeah.
I think too, what feels exciting for me about this feels like very inner city, like nature development or whatever it is, which we do a lot of different projects and we're a part of a lot of different visions here, but a lot of times I see them on the outskirts of the inner city. This is the inner city. And this is also a place, if it is, painted with beautiful murals and we do some type of beautification with gardens or spaces where people can get together and sit or whatever that looks like, it's allowing people who don't have access to, cars or whatever, it's giving them a place to exercise, to see green, to have space where they're not having to navigate not getting hit by a car.
Right.
And so bikes are one thing, but that's completely different than what it's looking like on Lake Street when you're trying to walk around there. It's crazy. And so this feels really exciting. It's obviously inner city, you've got all these bridges. That's some layers of history that I think are really interesting, and also the fact that we're developing it with maybe adding a little bit more to make it beautiful and a place where people can go to experience green. Feels really great. And I'm excited about it kind of developing and becoming something better than what it is. And anyway, yeah.
Did you have something to add?
Yes, Chair Russo and Commissioners, I just wanted to make note of the fact that within the regional trail boundary, there are a couple of existing park board, kind of more park areas that have been incorporated. So we have an area that's near Benamakoska called the Mall that's been included. There's also a CPRO site, which is kind of roughly in the middle of this stretch of trail. And that is about a 1 block size park. And then there's also Sioux Line Garden, which is kind of in between those two park areas, kind of on that western side. And we've included that space as well. So there's kind of these three sort of at least 1+ block park areas that we've included in the regional trail boundary as well. And those are because we have the parks in those areas. If we had some parks that would have regionally eligible amenities along the corridor, we would have considered adding some additional park space kind of on the eastern end as well, if we did. But we wanted to include those things so that there was kind of this connection and identifying that there's sort of a synergy between that paved trail that exists and then some of these park spaces, and trying to kind of make those more cohesive with each other, so that it's not just this trail that's next to this park and they don't really talk to each other, even though they have some relationship to each other. So we did do that as kind of an intentional way of trying to do a little more, even though we couldn't do a ton more.
Yes, Sue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to open a can of worms here tonight on this subject, but I would suggest that perhaps for a future meeting, it might be worth thinking about having a conversation with some representatives from each or several of the park agencies about safety in their parks and efforts that are made to address the safety issue when there's been an incident. What's the kind of follow-up, that type of thing. It's not just an urban park issue. I know that there are parks in the outer counties that have had issues. But I think it might be worth just having that kind of a conversation. And in the case of MPRB, you've got your own police, correct?
Yeah.
So I think that would be an interesting topic at some point. Not with the intention of alarming people, but instead with the intention of letting them know that this is an issue that the counties and the park agencies and the Met Council are addressing.
Sure. Yeah, and I know also some of our past things have highlighted there's a difference often between perception and reality. So
Exactly.
if we can talk about what do people think of what is happening
Exactly.
and maybe what it was 3 years ago versus what it is now, that might close the gap between those two. So that could be a good idea sometime when we have
Got it.
a light meeting month sometime.
Ever?
Yeah, okay. Well, then today's not that bad actually. I had a question about the proposed acquisitions. I know, normally we just say an in-holding's an in-holding, maybe it'll be acquired, maybe it won't, because we just don't know. But if the the current landowner to be proposed for is the Met Council, I feel like I can ask about it. What is that piece of land? Why does the Met Council have it? And do they have thoughts about selling it?
Do you want me to take it? So this is the one that I think is most actively being discussed is the one on the east side of the Sable Bridge. And I think it's about 5 acres. And this is one that honestly would be better managed under park board ownership. And so I think that currently there's a real desire to transfer or exchange it. I think that there is some land that the park board has that's near one of our Metro Transit sites that they would benefit from having. So I think there's currently some discussion about a possible exchange. I'm not involved in those conversations, but I know people who are. So I've been talking to them.
Does it have like
Do you?
a sewage pump station or a transit
It's
thing on it,
transit,
or is
isn't
it
it?
just land? What-
Adam, why don't you come up to the table?
How did the
I
Met
know you're
Council end
trying
up
to-
with this piece of land in the first place?
You want to introduce yourself, Adam? Excuse me.
Hi everyone, my name is Adam Arvidsson. I'm the Director of Strategic Planning at the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. I'm not sure I know the history of how the Met Council came to own the property near the Sabo Bridge, but I expect it had something to do with transit or the construction of the Sabo Bridge or whatever. A lot of agencies sometimes end up with extra land, especially when there's transportation acquisitions and then they don't need it all. Currently, that land does have trees on it, fruit trees actually, an orchard was planted there. But then it has of late been just primarily cordoned off with Jersey barriers and fencing to prevent people living there. So it's right adjacent to the trail as it comes down from the Sabo Bridge. It's again urban, but it's kind of a pretty spot. It's I think an opportunity in this vision plan to think about how do we enhance the Midtown Greenway corridor environmentally. There is language and even cost estimation for looking at environmental enhancements throughout the corridor, and this I think would be a key site for that. In terms of what Emmett refers to, I think there's several current transit projects that are interacting with parkland in different ways. And as I've been in conversations with Metro Transit staff on various projects about how do we mitigate impacts to parkland, I think this property is an interesting one that we do have in the back pocket, right? So if we ever need to do, if Metro Transit needs to acquire land sort of under our rules, we can't divest parkland without going all the way to a district court proceeding unless there is an even swap that takes place. So I think that there's interest in this particular parcel as a way to potentially mitigate impacts of other transit projects in the system. Nothing's been finalized, but those conversations have been raised, and I think it creates an opportunity for the Greenway, but also potentially for some other, I'll say, collaborative transit park interfaces that are happening throughout Minneapolis.
Okay, so it's not even something where there's like something that has to operate under an easement, it's literally just open green space that could be parking. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Yes, Anthony?
With the dollar amount that you put towards the amenities, is there some rhyme or reason to that, $120,000 per location? Would you rather have 150,000? Could we have 2?
Of course, they'd rather have more money.
Chair Russo, Commissioner Taylor, as far as the cost estimates go for those different amenity zones, the approximate dollar figures were us kind of looking at the suite of possible options and trying to do kind of a best estimation of if we kind of distribute these things across the whole corridor, trying to get kind of a rough sort of estimate that we could use. I mean, if if we increase the overall amenity zone costs here, you know, of course, there would be the possibility of potentially incorporating more of some of these things. At this time, it's really meant to be that list of possible low-cost amenities. It's meant to be sort of like a pick list, and at the time of implementation, we would kind of do the engagement and determine kind of those final things.
Is there a, let me say, in terms of the impact on community, one other thing, like, so the not eligible stuff in terms of that 120,000, and you say to be funded by, so these elements would be funded by HICRA or City of Minneapolis if they happen, or they are not to be funded by the City of Minneapolis?
So the low-cost amenities list that's on that page 45, the idea would be those would be amenities that the park board could bring the regional dollars to. They could be things that if the city and HICRA decided they wanted to throw in some money, I don't think we would say no. But I think at this time, we are currently anticipating that the kind of cost estimates for these amenity zones would be using the regional dollars, because these would all be eligible uses for regional funds. And we would, at the time of implementation for these areas, particularly the ones that aren't currently on park board land, we would then kind of work through an agreement with whoever the landowner is to determine kind of the finer details.
So the concerns about safety or things safety enhanced, which lighting would probably be one of those things, those would be, we would work through the city to have additional enhancements related to those things?
Correct.
Okay.
At least in how the agreement and how things are presently written, yes.
Since I know this is used, obviously not just for recreation, largely this is a transportation corridor for a lot of people. Does anything about this designation change its eligibility for like federal transportation dollars?
I don't think so. Chair and Commissioners, it would, I think there are a lot of opportunities for improvement, and I think that's why the park board's getting involved. Whether that level of projects would be required when the corridor is already in place
And that probably actually gets more to the like pavement maintenance stuff that's
yeah,
under their other things anyway.
it's already under agreement.
Just wondering. Anything else? Otherwise, and we're also open to motions at any point too.
Well, I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All right, I presume that is a motion for the proposed actions from the staff report. Is that accurate, Monica?
Yes.
Okay. So then that is that the Metropolitan Council approve the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's Midtown Greenway Regional Trail Long Range Plan and require MPRB prior to initiating any construction to send preliminary plans to the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services Interceptor Engineering Assistant Manager. Is there any further discussion on that? We got into it a little bit already. Okay. One comment I'll have is when we were describing this arrangement where the city actually is also involved, in addition to the HICRA and the park board, is, you know, we told agencies we'd like to see more collaboration with various groups and agencies and cross-functional things, and this is complicated and weird because you're doing exactly what we asked, so. It's taken a little bit to wrap my head around, wait, that's the city's responsibility, but we told you to do that, so, okay. I like it. Anything else? I think I'll just kind of echo things that Tess and Anthony were saying. This sounds like it'll be really nice for making it easier for people to get in for kind of lower commitment sorts of uses, you know, if you're not doing the whole thing. Especially, you know, a little bit of water, bathrooms and lighting goes a long way, places to sit down, just these kinds of things that you're talking about, these access point amenities are pretty high return on investment items, so that'll be nice.
Yep.
Anything else? Otherwise, all in favor of that motion as presented, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. That carries, thank you. Good job, Zoe.
Yeah, first one's in the can, Zoe.
I don't think we made it too hard for you. That's not what goes with that. Okay, so then that brings us on to our information item for the day, which is essentially some administrative stuff for ourselves. 2025 work planning. We have the Regional Parks and Trails team, which is being summed up as Colin and maybe Kevin? Or just Colin? All right.
Mr. Chair,
You are the team today, go for it.
It is just me today. Unfortunately, Kevin is out sick. So I'll be leading us through this brief presentation today. So once again, for the record, Colin Kelly, planning analyst, here to share this information item with you today. Kevin, of course, did help me with the information item you have before you in the presentation, and we greatly appreciate that. I'll have a brief presentation for you here, just a few slides, and then what we're especially interested in is hearing from you. Before we get into it, just a quick point about the imagery you see here. You might have noticed there were a lot of greens, images of summer, and things like that in the Midtown Greenway presentation. Well, this one, it's a little bit more wintry, it's a little bit more of a flavor that you might experience like the snowfall we got yesterday. It is still winter here in Minnesota, so this is just a reminder. It might be here for a little while longer, but certainly nice to see those greens and blues in Midtown Greenway. So anyhow, let's move right along here. So there's at least 3 foundations for the Met Council's Regional Parks and Trails work planning efforts to date. They include our Section 9 of the 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan. You might remember that one. Ongoing Met Council Parks and Trails work, as well as agency-identified regional topics. Taking each of those in turn briefly, Section 9 of the policy plan is a 4-year work plan for policy plan implementation. The 17 items in that work plan are organized into 5 themes that relate to different sections of the policy plan and the actions therein, including accountability and research, protection and restoration, culture, trails, and finance. This work plan is attachment 1 in the staff report. Ongoing Met Council Parks and Trails work is also an important source for what we must take on this year and in future years. This includes the day-to-day work of the planning, parks ambassador, and finance staff, including long-range plan reviews, coordinating equity and outreach work across the region, and administering grant programs. This work plan is attachment 3 in the staff report. Finally, we'd like to focus some attention on agency-identified topics which have a close relationship with the policy plan's work plan and the work groups that were organized at the beginning of the policy plan update back in 2022, based on their and your input. 2 examples include trail system coordination and strategic funding. This area of future work is also intended to explore regional policies and efforts related to subclassifications, cost-effective research methods, and greater advocacy at the state level. Using these foundations and engagement with implementing agency partners, we're in the process of drafting and refining a slate of monthly partner meetings for 2025 that are intended to tilt toward greater collaboration and interactivity, as well as a work plan for the Council Parks team. Council staff sought the input and feedback of implementing agencies over the last 2 months to prioritize shared work and agenda topics, add items we might have missed, and talk about how we can improve monthly meetings going forward. We'll continue down that path during our next partner meeting in 2 weeks' time. Some highlights for agency council work plan are identifying shared goals and projects at the regional level, for example, snowmaking facilities across the region, to discuss new strategies to increase funding of the system, to explore relaunching topic-specific work groups, like I mentioned previously, including climate and natural systems, trail system coordination and strategic funding, and to begin prioritization and implementation of American Indian Advisory Council recommendations. Additional content may be found in attachment 2 of the staff report. Highlights for the Parks team work plan include the items you see here on the slide: Imagine 2050 implementation, integrating art and policy into the parks program, updating the adventure guide and developing other outreach tools, developing park visitation forecasting tool, and the GIS improvement project through a policy plan housekeeping amendment. Additional content may be found in attachment 3 of the staff report. And I told you we were going to be brief. So now it's your turn. We would like to hear your thoughts and reactions to the summary of the draft work plan items I've just shared with you and open it up for discussion. We have some guiding questions for you here, and they include: what would you prioritize in the list of projects or topics? Are there any topics missing from the work plans you see before you in attachments 1, 2, and 3 of the information item? And finally, what other thoughts or comments do you have about the work plans you see before you, which span a number of timeframes? 4 years in the policy plans work plan, and a shorter time frame we're focusing on with our agency partners. So with that, I'll stand for your comments and questions and hear what you have to say. Thanks.
Okay. That's pretty wide open with some
Chair?
surprisingly detailed attachments. We
I
have a
know.
lot to do.
Well, if I could just say, thank you. You know, Emma, under stress, has controlling tendencies, and like, I was really nervous about this information item, because I'm like, wow, we're really just sort of like laying it all out. But you know, in talking to the team and even the park agencies, they're like, this is a work in progress. This is a dialogue that needs to happen over this year as well as over the next 4 years. And so I just wanted to clearly make that point before we kind of jump in, because these are not, like, even though that, you know, you just said the American Indian Advisory Council's commitments. Well, that's still a let's work it out topic. We need to figure it out together, and that's, you know, so that's the spirit of this information item. Hope that helps.
Okay. Any additional feedback? Yes, Cecily?
I always have comments and questions. I think this is great. There's nothing I would suggest taking out or adding, because you have a lot in here. But I do have a few questions, and I can tell you what page and such. I guess that's page 3 under culture. Number 8. I think it's awesome that Met Council is looking at this cultural landscape classification. You know, we've talked about it a bit over the years. But I'm a bit curious, because mentions about it in here, of course, coordinating with American Indian tribes, but other cultural communities haven't been mentioned elsewhere. And I'm just curious who those would be.
I think that may just be a catch-all because we said, wait a minute, maybe we should mention that there are other communities to consider, and hadn't gotten into who that would be yet, right?
Yep. Excuse me. Yes, Chair and Cecily. The cultural landscape classification rose to the top through the conversations we've been having with the city of St. Paul and Indian Mounds Regional Park. But there are other ideas out there for other cultures, and whether you know, some of them have been offered in the spirit of like a bridging facility, which is also a special feature, or a cultural landscape. But the Latino community, that's an example of one that I've heard come up. You know, whether it's, I think it's Lilydale Regional Park and the west side of St. Paul, and just some of the interest around that park to celebrate some of the community culture that exists in that area. So I think this is one that, again, is a work in progress. And I think things will emerge as the implementing agencies engage, you know, with with us, but more importantly with the communities. So I think there's a lot more questions than answers today.
Great. So then,
Yeah, let's take a turn here.
Could I just piggyback on your comment?
Because she's gonna have a bunch more.
Yeah, I really am glad you brought that up. I think it's an important point, and I think that the cultural landscape classification gives both the commission and the park agencies an opportunity to tell the history that includes everyone.
right,
And a good example that Anthony and I were talking about earlier is Sweet Hollow. It's on the east side, it's got an incredible history with Italian immigrants, Swedish immigrants of all sorts. And I think it gives us an opportunity to tell many histories that will really enhance people's interest in the parks. It'll be a great learning opportunity for everybody, even the adults.
no, absolutely, and with Minnesota Historical Society nearby, you know, they have a lot of information about people who immigrated before Minnesota was a state through now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and in addition to the Historical Society, there's also the county history centers that have a lot. When I first joined the council 6 years ago, one of the things I tried to do before I went to a township, a city, or a county was to go online and look for information about the history of the community, and it was always really interesting. I loved the ones that were smart enough to include information about, you know, the indigenous population that was here when the Swedes or the French or the Irish showed up. It was always a little disconcerting when they just started out talking about the French Canadians. You know, it was like, wait a minute. So I think it really offers a wide opportunity.
Yeah.
And I would encourage park agencies and IMPAS to keep the history center and the county history groups in mind. I recall, I think it was about a year ago, I was at Denmark Township's board meeting, and there was a mother and daughter. The mother was elderly, but they were trying to, and I'm gonna have trouble remembering the name of the little parish, but they were trying to get a historical designation for a small church that dates back to the 1800s. And so it's in an area that is very lush in terms of outdoors, but also lush in terms of history, so.
Yeah. The Sweet Hollow example is the one that I think of too, because it's regional parkland where my family actually lived at one point.
And my family was Dayton's Bluff.
Yeah. And then the other thing that's interesting with the American Indian things, we talked about things not having information. One of the things that I found when I was just researching where I live was how some of it's really unclear because it was disputed territory. Like when the US government eventually said, well, guys, we need some borders to figure out which one of you we're negotiating with for treaties. The line between Dakota and Ojibwe control is almost, it's like blocks from your house. I was looking at that map a while ago, so some of that seems like, well, this is missing because it was confusing and nobody really wrote it down. But, and also there's, is this in Chisago? There's the Swedish immigrant trail that's
Lindstrom.
outside of our purview, I think.
Yeah, it'll
but
connect to Gateway,
yeah,
ultimately.
but is very much a similar thing where they're using a trail to explore an immigrant history. So maybe there's something like that within that council area too. Do you have enough time?
Oh, yeah, I have 6 more.
Yeah, I'll move on to the next one. And then as I see hands come up, I'll go from you to somebody else and back to you.
So on page 5, an attachment to April 17th, I don't know the acronym RSEA question mark.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Harris, RSEA is an acronym for Regionally Significant Ecological Areas. So in the past,
Thank
it's
you.
been a tool that the council, in partnership with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, have used to sort of delineate, sort of point out where there are high quality ecological areas throughout the metropolitan area and beyond. I think there's some progress perhaps in updating that in coming months and years potentially.
I'll just add that
Great.
it's an aggregation of ecological information, animal habitat information, and a whole host of data sets that try to come together to bring sort of to talk about species richness and beyond.
But then that drives both like search areas for new parks as well as potentially informing if this is going to be some sort of a park thing, which classification should it be? Will it be like, is it more a natural resource? Is it more a cultural resource? Is it a little of both? That kind of thing.
Great. I just didn't know that acronym. Okay, page 6, strategic funding. Under the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund Program, first bullet. This is really related to the 40-40-20, isn't it?
The strategic funding pursuing PAYGO? I'm sorry.
Yeah, if a group has already hit their cap, is that when other agencies don't need the funding for
I
unused
think we might
PTLAF?
be conflating several
Yeah.
different things. First, tell us about the term pay-go, because
Yeah.
that's one that I'm confused about. I know you've told me before and I don't remember. That's a particular thing.
Chair and Cecily, that's a great question, and there's no reason why you should know that. It's,
Oh, I
it is,
didn't ask that.
it's,
He asked that.
okay, oh, PAYGO.
No,
Well,
I asked for the use of unused PTLAF funds.
Oh, you're going to the last bullet point on that.
I asked about PAYGO when the regional plan draft came to us.
got it.
Okay, I thought you had said first bullet and we're talking
No,
about that.
no.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Last square, first
I'm sorry.
circle.
Oh, the first circle, that's what my brain heard. I had a long day.
I'm just wondering about the equity
Yes.
of that.
This is a long and slow conversation, but one of the ideas is, agencies that are in the acquisition stage, like Dakota County, Three Rivers Park District, Carver County, the sort of Washington County, kind of the periphery of the system, or the outer edge of the system, oftentimes are challenged by that funding cap for the park acquisition program. And are there ways that we could explore how agencies could exceed that cap, especially if they, if there are opportunities available that, so they don't wanna miss an opportunity is what we're talking about. And this is, there is a real equity question here, and I think that there's a fairness question, and that is something that all is in front of us. That isn't a conversation that's been had. So stay tuned, that's something that I'm imagining will come back here.
2 clarifications on that. I know we've come close, particularly with Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund dollars rather than legacy ones. Have we ever actually had stuff in the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund program expire before we could spend it?
Chair and Commissioners, yes. We have given small amounts of Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund dollars back, or we didn't use them, they basically were canceled. And while that was a disappointment, it was a small amount of money. I think we have a total of 5 years to use Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund dollars, and the way Jessica manages the program is she does $2 and $3 million requests. I mean, we've done 1, 2, and 3 actually, and we just ensure that what we ask for to the best of our ability gets used, and so we have a pretty good read on that.
And it's of course not existed as long, but have we ever lost legacy dollars?
We have not.
Not yet, okay. So at the moment, unused Parks and Trails Legacy Advisory Fund dollars are not, they've been unused in the sense that they're sitting there not being used yet, but not unused
But
in the
they-
sense that they've
yeah.
been at risk of losing them
Right.
so far. The other question I had is, I know legacy dollars cover a wide range of things. For the stuff that's ending up in the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund, once in that fund, of course, they're specified as for acquisitions, a capital expenditure. Is the restriction of it being for capital expenditure already there when it comes from the powers that be of legacy to Met Council? Or are we applying that by our policy that puts it into the PAOF? In other words,
Yeah.
is it possible for us to, by Met Council decree, convert things to non-capital use if they've gotten unused out of acquisition funds?
Chair and Commissioners, I don't think it's possible to, because the 10% of Parks and Trails legacy funds that are set aside legislatively for the acquisition program is, you know, it's dedicated, it's not.
Those are a portion that's
Yeah.
already earmarked for
Yeah.
acquisition
Mhm.
at the higher level than just us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That makes sense.
And those are a hot commodity, everybody likes to use legacy funds first, because they're just a little bit
They're easier.
easier to use, yeah.
Back to you, if you have follow-ups or more
Page
questions.
7, regional trail system coordination. I would really appreciate if that trail coordination work group looked at more than just bicycle transportation. If it is a multi-use trail, it shouldn't just be bike networks. And then,
Cecily, I just want to comment that Zoe, our new trail planner, is already involved in webinars and she's done a scoring system around pedestrian use, so we are actively thinking about that,
great.
so.
Yeah, I know one of the things that Cecily and I talked with you about before was that there was some internal Met Council guidance about, I think we call it design standards, that currently specify stuff about pavement.
Mhm.
And I know some flexibility on that is one of the things that should probably be discussed there, what that might look like in different places.
Thank you.
Right, because people walk year-round, people don't necessarily bike year-round, depending on where you're at.
I know people that do, but they're crazy.
Yeah, they might use fat tire bikes, yeah.
That probably includes Anthony and Zoe, I just wanted to point that out. Probably Tracy.
I do it with a fat bike and dogs. But yeah, I know what you're getting at.
And then further down that same section, collaborate with the ambassador program, and I'm not quite sure what that is.
Oh, that's really, again, just inside baseball around, I'm sorry, this was a lot of internal documents that we pulled into this, but the ambassador program is our parks ambassador program that you know about. And
Okay.
the idea is our regional trails system has an opportunity, I think, to be activated in ways that it hasn't in the past. The conversation you just had about the Midtown Greenway, I think, is a great example of that. Like, I think that that's, so I think that there's a real collaboration opportunity to get our ambassador folks thinking actively about our regional trail system. Because our regional trails, like you know, they while they are multi-use, you know, they're predominantly bicycles.
This is essentially expanding the scope of those employees' job duties, because the whole ambassador program are positions that didn't exist until just a few years ago. And so far, they've been focused on parks. This is just saying, now that you've figured out your way around things a little bit, let's add more stuff for you to do.
Yeah, I think that there's just a lot of opportunity to work on regional trails, and they are working on regional trails.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't realize they were all paid positions, okay. And final question, page 8, under finance program. Fourth bullet down. Sixth circle down, modernization program. I don't know what you're modernizing there.
Excellent question. This was funding that came from the state legislature in 2023. And it was funding that was under the umbrella of climate and adaptation work. And there's a kind of an outstanding question there. Is this one-time funding, or is there an opportunity to think of this as a program? And the governor has a climate initiative going on, and I think there are some that are thinking of it more in the program column. And we just wanted to make sure that if that is true, that we're well positioned to take advantage of it, because I think there is a lot of work that we can do to modernize our system to be more resilient to climate change.
So that's natural resources or hardscape or
All of the above.
all of the above, okay.
Yeah.
Great, well, thank you, that was all
In-
the questions.
Is that like specifically limited in scope to climate kinds of things, or, I mean, there's also sort of like cultural shift to different use kinds of things that also could potentially be modernization?
It's pretty open, Tony. I think that even things like bringing water to trails is something, just with increased heat, like the need to have trails or water and comfort stations for people in those situations. You know, I think tree planting, you could make an argument that it could be a modernization tool. This is something that the agencies are actively figuring out.
Another one that we've heard several long-range plan updates mention that kind of falls into this is agencies talking about redoing bathrooms to get away from their kind of older traditional, here's a men's side, here's a women's side, here's what they look like, to more kind of individual and family bathrooms and things like that. That is driven by shift in what people want out of stuff, and you know, maybe that's a modernization too. So like that could cover a lot of different kinds of things. I'm just trying to get an idea of what it means.
It is.
Okay.
Good question.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Yes, Monica.
I think it's funny that you have accountability and research first in the projects. And then the first one is develop it, and then implement it. Because to me, accountability should be the last one. But you're developing, so it has to be first. So I understand that, kind of. Because then it doesn't get implemented when you finally develop it, and something is missing there.
You mean the time frame?
No, yeah, but I mean, it's just in general, if we're gonna check how people like the trails,
Yeah.
It should be the last thing after we implement everything.
After you've already developed the system.
Yes, and then, but if we're developing the system, then what is it here that you tell, okay, now we're implementing the system to check it works?
Well, it is kind of at the end, because the
It is kind of,
the reason this is here is because we said after
yes,
you know, what, 140 years of some of these parks existing, oh hey, we don't have this yet.
yeah, no, I remember that one, that's what I mentioned, we have to be more, I know now, you have to be very specific with these wordings. The other one I was thinking is, to me, finances should be covering everything. Because if you don't have the means, there is no way to do anything. So, I don't know how that could be a possibility. You know, it's not number 1, 2, 3. It should be part of. You want to do all this, but you need this part before. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
The idea that funding is the strategy to do so much of this work.
Yeah, it's kind of like you have all these plans or
Yeah.
your Christmas list, but if you don't have the way to go there, it's how it's gonna happen, kind of like that. And then I do have a question. In culture number 9, there is develop inventory and guidelines for harvested fruits, mushrooms, and other plants, which I think is great. But who is gonna benefit from the products? Is this people, like community, learning how to do it, or is a way to preserve and, keep the prairie as it is, because these are, local products that it will help in case our prairies and natural resources, or it's just, we're gonna learn the American Indian ways and how it is, so we wanna incorporate this part of the program. Or it's just me, oh, look at that, there is an apple, I can just grab it and eat it, I don't know. So, do you have a plan for that one?
Chair and Monica, we have no plan for that one. But I'll just tell you, the
That's why it's on
agencies
the
are
plan.
working on harvesting guidelines. Generally speaking, I think I can say it's for personal consumption, it isn't for commercial use, like that's one of the worries, I think. And there's also a lot of concern that harvesting could have negative impacts to the natural systems. But done well, I think it can actually help the natural system. So there's just a ton that needs to be learned, and there's a lot of programming that will need to go around this one. And there are several of the agencies already have ordinances in place, and there's more to be done.
Well, I like it, I think it's very interesting and it should help. And
I know that's something that people are debating a bit on the state park system as well
Well,
right
doesn't the
now.
DNR have policies? Cause I know
They
when
do.
people do the foraging classes at William O'Brien,
Yeah,
it's not for commercial use, it's for education.
yeah, there are some policies there. There are some people that are trying to get some changes to those policies and other people pushing back on them for various reasons, and it's been a topic of discussion recently.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say, there's legislation in flux at the Capitol.
Yeah, and some of that's going to be, again, once it gets to the legislature, it's beyond just a rulemaking thing. It might be the legislature says to do it one way or the other, and there you go. The other question I have with this, it says, American Indian groups among stakeholders. I'm less familiar with what some of the Dakota treaties say than the Ojibwe ones, but are there treaty rights to foraging within our park system? Do we know?
Wild rice, if there's any wild rice in the lakes.
They might not have gotten those in these ones.
I don't think so.
I know some of the treaties down here, frankly, were a little worse than some of the other ones, so they probably didn't get it quite as much, but yeah.
I don't think so.
I think you might be right, but
I don't know.
doesn't mean that it shouldn't be included in the policies, but it's something to consider. First, check the basic baseline of what's the legal requirement, if any.
I was gonna also say that since Bob Mueller is not here, I will feel bad if I don't mention, but I believe the ambassador program is pretty much close to what we have been asking, to get more marketing about our programs. So I like those topics because that's what is gonna increase people knowing about it. So it's just good point, not complain.
Thank you on behalf of Bob.
I hope he's with me.
I'll just say overall, in terms of the thing, we're seeing a lot of stuff that, like as you were saying, this is a certain amount of inside baseball of things that staff do normally that we just haven't always seen, and we're getting a little more visibility into that. There's also some things that we've made commitments to doing, and we're finally writing some of them down, and some things that agencies have asked from us based on what we said in policy, and them going, well, that's not quite done, and so yeah. So besides this list of the what we need to do, we're also gonna need to do some identification of who and when, in that there's probably some things that are just staff, some things that are staff working with an agency, some things that you're gonna want primarily from this commission, some where you might be working with staff and agencies, or just agencies first and then coming to a commission thing later. So just trying to identify who needs to have input and where, we have some very broad things, like 2026 to 2028. Do we need to break that down into there's a phase that's between staff and then a phase that's policymakers, or is it all kind of at once? Or is it an iterative back and forth several times? Just so we can get a better idea of who needs to be doing things where, because we'll need that to find out, are we at all on track as we get further into some of these dates.
Chair, that's one of the reasons that I was reluctant to bring anything here, because I'm just like, we have not figured this out, but I think that's okay.
I agree, yeah, this is we are attempting to be both more transparent about what is happening and better about holding us accountable for some things that we're leaving open, and this is new to all of us,
Yep.
so it's certainly the draft of our plan of the things that are in progress is also in progress. It's fine, but
It's great.
open to lots of ideas, and there's a lot of things on here that will take some doing.
Yeah, that will.
And refinement. I mean, basically, I'm approaching this not even so much as we got this thing, this is what we're doing right now, as let's try to move into something so that we help set up the commission for 20 years from now, having something like this where they look at it and like, oh yeah, this is all that, everything's all ready to go, because they've figured it out in a few iterations by then. I don't think we're going to have it all totally worked out within 4 years, but it's a start.
You're exactly right.
Anthony.
This is kind of, and I'm kind of fine where it is, one of the things I wanted to, so is there in the work plan, something related to winter? Because I do think that winter is an absolute changing landscape, right? That in terms of regional park system right now, snowmaking and a regional approach to it and a distribution of the opportunities inside the entire system would be really interesting. I think there's a tremendous amount of learning from Three Rivers as an operator that could give us some very swift, good operational practice. Watching Ramsey County struggle, like, just looks silly some days to me, and Battle Creek, and that was a legislative investment. And I think, but I think there's more we could do as we think about the system, because right now, I think that Highland, and cross country especially, is really interesting because it is the one that is affordable and accessible for families and people, and is connected to the school system. And right now, we just don't have anything east. We really, I don't know what we have north, really, but there's something we can do that will be interesting, relevant. And that's part of a conversation about winter as a response to the reality of climate change. And it's a way that we can really, I think, bring it down to a real access level in terms of families and youth. And there's just something we can do there to be really interesting. And then the thing around mushing, and my question, mushing, is there, inside of that, is there any conversation related to scheduling? Because, I just, people love their dogs, and maybe, the only reason some people actually get outside is the dog, and maybe there's something, but scheduling and as we think about trail use and multi-trail use and that body of work, and we are the scheduling capital of the world right now.
I can tell you that there actually has been motion on that in the last few years from user group pressure and agencies revising things. We haven't seen any of it come through this commission, but Three Rivers and Washington County and Dakota County have all added trail designations that allow scheduling in places that they didn't before. I think there's probably still some more opportunities for that, but it's definitely been a thing that's quietly been shifting. So like if you look at Lake Elmo is the nearest example to my house, there used to be one little multi-use trail that was about 2 miles, which was fine for snowshoeing, but it wasn't really enough to get out for skijoring or bike joring in the summer. And since it was kind of the snowshoeing / hiking trail, it also meant it was packed down and usually really icy and actually kind of dangerous. Well, the last time that Washington County did an update I don't know if it was just of maps or if it was a whole long-range plan, but they redesignated the entire west half of the park to multi-use. So now there's like 10 miles of trail that are open to people, and I know a bunch of people that go there all the time. I know Three Rivers used to be very restrictive about where dogs could go and changed that pretty significantly, maybe 4 years ago, something. It's still not everywhere, but it's a lot more than it used to be. I have to check in on the Dakota County one. There was something in progress the last time I asked about it, and I think they've probably made some changes that I should double check on. But yeah, it's gotten no visibility in our conversations, but I see it on Facebook.
Yeah, and I know the people in the community, and it just is like as I saw that, I go, it feels more accessible than Bush, like or more urgent in terms of potential. But so is there room to add that to the work group? Does it kind of come in there? And then even as we push to the implementing agencies, is there a programmatic opportunity there? Because I think, because I will say that I think people think it's a dog training issue. It's actually a human training issue, as most things are. Dogs are easy to train, humans are a problem. And so anyway, there's something there programmatically that could be really interesting for us as we kind of percolate that up. And there's room. I mean, there's growth in people and desire. So.
And even if it's not getting people out with their own dogs, just to get out of the house in the winter to do something. I know a couple of people in Wisconsin that have recurring events every year where there's certain parks that they go out to and they do demonstrations of running with dog sleds and things like this as a just community event. People come out and have cocoa and whatever, see the dogs, see some other things, do some skiing on their own. I think they usually have sleigh rides with horses too, that kind of stuff. So some of it's even if you don't have the dogs and the sled and stuff to do the thing yourself, even if you get out for one afternoon on a dreary winter day, that's something, right? So there's some probably partnerships with the groups of people that do that activity with the general public and park agencies to just kind of show it off too. If anyone wants to do that, call me, I know people.
Is the snowmaking something that we could approach as a legislative ask for that could come through Met Council possibly and then be distributed to implementing agencies? Is that, or the implementing agencies continue to have to go themselves individually? How would you?
That's something that we can talk about. Right now, it's really the implementing agencies that are leading it. The whole idea of more coordinated approach is both exciting and terrifying. And, it's something that could be, I wouldn't want to add costs to the whole PASS program, which I know agencies try hard to keep that as low as possible. So I don't know, Jonathan, if there's anything to add there.
Sure. Anthony, you're spot on. Jonathan Fleming, Three Rivers Park District. Three Rivers for some time has been talking about the need to have more manufactured cross-country ski snow trails, and not necessarily within suburban Hennepin County, throughout the region. Both for the high school sports aspect and also because winter's gotta be fun, folks, or we're gonna lose more people. The governor today talked about the demographic shift that has occurred, and it's really all about making Minnesota so fun in the winter that you don't mind living here in the winter. And one of the best ways to do that is to have consistent outdoor activities available. Now, I love the ski touring idea too, but again, for that to be successful, you also need to make. So what would be cool is if the agencies all got together and started talking about, well, who's got an interest in pursuing this, and we can provide the economics on it.
Yeah.
Both operational and capital. And then build a standalone plan to do it and try to get the state to fund it. Good luck with that.
I really, that's really great to hear you say that, because I don't think I've actually said that out loud ever in a meeting, but I've been thinking about it a lot. And because you're absolutely right, that we actually have to do a conscious job of making winter wonderful for people who live here. And the ability, and what happened this winter is that people have been waiting for snow to show up in their backyard, so it actually made winter longer. It's a weird, that's been people's lived experiences, that winter got longer because they were waiting for snow to show up. But the people who already are engaged, they knew that the course was ready on December 5th.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so they got out and everybody else was waiting. And then that also shows up in loss of snow, trail pass sales. Right? We didn't see the bump. The lessons weren't booked this year.
Right.
It's just a weird thing, and the trails have been ready all winter. At least at Highland and Elm Creek, and Battle Creek kind of coming on lower. I mean, so there's something to think about there.
Is snowmaking equipment mobile? Like, could you make snow at one park on Monday and then put it on a truck and make snow at another park on Tuesday?
You could do a really poor job doing it.
Well,
Fair
It
enough.
is possible, but
Yeah,
it's
but
not
it's not.
ideal.
but the downhill ski resorts move stuff from run to run,
Yes.
so there is technology
Barely.
to do it.
I mean, but run to run is different
It's
than
different.
trucking
Yeah.
across town.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to find out like how shareable would that investment be?
It's all about water.
No.
It's water and cooling, I mean, you could have a portable cooling tower, you
Yeah.
gotta get the water down to a certain
get the water
temperature to
to-
make
yeah.
the snow.
Is
And
there-
that's normally done using lake water or pond water, the least desirable thing is to pump ground water
Yeah.
and then artificially cool it and then make it as very
And then
expensive.
let it
so
cure
it's not
for
good.
3 days. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, has there been any kind of a conversation with the sporting industry, the Cabela's and the Dick's Sports and, I would think that this is hitting them as well.
It's an excellent point.
Yeah, I mean, I would think they'd be a good partner in the lobbying effort and might even be willing to do some matching funds of some sort, I don't know.
And you might get more cooperation on like things like lobbying from the local ones rather than the Cabela's and the
Exactly.
chains. Like,
Yeah.
I know there's, Ski West,
Gear
out-
West.
Gear West, out in Long Lake, and then there's Joe's in Canada. Some of those local shops are probably a better partner for that.
But even the local stores for Cabela's and Dick's might be willing to.
They might, yeah.
Sometimes they've got a level of independence that we don't recognize they have.
It'd be worth asking.
Yeah.
In my head, I'm anticipating them going, oh, corporate, but maybe.
Yeah.
Well, what about that outdoor recreation roundtable? I don't know what issues they're looking at.
No idea.
I'd say that Jonathan, I just, with Three Rivers as the ability, we just have very few situations where we will know what the investment is, we have the expertise, we know the return on it. Like, I think it's one of those things that is really kind of exciting because we have all the proof. And we can point to every time we do it, and we do it right, we get X. And I think in terms of utilization, and just could be real, and then for us to also share and model this, Outstate is doing the same thing. And the truth of the matter is Nordic community is leading this. The catalyst at Battle Creek was the Nordic community, even with some of their own money. The catalyst at Worth and the park board there was the local community and their own money. I think that's one of the things, even more than Cabela's, will actually energize local communities of families and skiers and high school around the idea of doing it. And, the tubers get the benefit, because tubing is a gateway drug. And, and it really can generate revenue for the locations that do it well. I think, matter of fact, even we have a great example of two ends of the spectrum. Elm Creek is such a great example of a small, very localized experience of it.
Well, and if there's a way of when you get to the lobbying point in this process, way of getting some of those high school students in to talk about the experience, rather than a bunch of adults.
Yeah.
I always think that makes a difference.
I want to come back to it and say I like what you were saying about a holistic approach to winter stuff as a matter of regional livability. Because historically we've approached it largely on a particular activity, like here we're talking largely skiing, in a particular park or a particular park agency, and trying to talk more about just how do we make winter nicer everywhere through the region, across the board, is a very broad discussion. I think that would be an interesting thing for us to talk about more. I
You
don't-
know, what, as a new winter person really, because, there are winter in my country but never the same, it has always surprised me how little Minnesota does with ice. My daughter skates, and most of the skate is indoors because, there is, these hockey rinks outdoors that are always used and there is always hockey happening and it's super cold sometimes. But there are so many little ponds and lakes and I don't think it's that hard to actually shovel it. This winter, it was very cold, there was no snow and people who have been skating on it and that makes another attraction to everyone, like you put, a little bonfire around and then have people come in. And skates are not that expensive, really. I mean,
Well, and I
some
think
are not.
there's also a difference there between what you see in our park systems versus private stuff.
But My
So,
point is, we have lakes,
yeah,
tons.
so like I live relatively close to a lake, don't get me wrong, I'm not on the lake shore, but I'm near it. And there are people that do live on the lake shore who shovel out rinks and make homemade Zambonis for them and things like that. And that can be done, but it's not something you see park agencies doing.
Which I think
Probably
it will
partly
be,
because expense, partly because liability, partly other things.
if we're gonna explore how to do something like that,
Yeah,
I will probably think it's maybe close of the same cost, if not less, having a Zamboni cleaner the lakes than creating fake snow, kind of.
Yeah.
And then the parks could have it. I mean, Elk Creek has a very nice pond that is human-made, so it will be pretty easy to clear up. And then you have people enjoying another kind of activity that I believe is actually part of Minnesota. Minnesota is the state of hockey, so everybody should have skates and know how to skate. Which they do, but it always shocked me, it's indoors. It's just in Mexico City, in the middle of the summer, the center square is gonna be filled with ice so people can go there and start skating. And it's, 90, 85 degrees, so it's super expensive, I'm sure. But they are skating because it's something different and it's new. So if we try to, use the natural blazer freezer that we have out here, that might be another option.
and a lot of those indoor rinks are booked back to back to back for
Yes.
hockey practices, so if you just wanna go
Yes.
casually, it's harder.
Yeah, unless you want to skate from 10 a.m. to 10:30, that might be an opportunity. Yeah.
There are a lot of individual city parks that do that, but they wanna have a more controlled environment, cause Anthony was just saying, there's a safety element, so you do a pond and then you're kind of open to some
But people
liability
do
there.
ice fishing all the time.
And that's correct, but they're taking that initiative on themselves.
Well,
If the city goes and they clear off a rink and then, there's some things that I think the city has to think about, that
I think something we should, I don't know, to me it should be a given. You live in Minnesota, it's 11,000 lakes or more, you need to know how to swim and you need to know how to skate.
It's definitely
And
something
I'm not
like,
from here.
if we get into like what we're talking about here of like workshops with multi-agency things, like how can we just do winter? If one of them has some ideas about how to do it well, then that's a chance to share them with others. Like with this, the snowmaking, same way. It may be that an agency is kind of interested in it, but if they've never done it before, they're kind of nervous about trying. But if they can go to some other agency, like, can you show us how to do this well? That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, it's like winter, multiple activities, multiple places, multiple approaches, sharing thing makes a lot of sense. Is there others?
I think Amanda.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm just sitting here digesting all of this and I love it and it's getting me excited. And thinking about it and, I would just volunteer, like, I think this is a good exercise between all the implementing agencies and coming up with a package, like a real, winter outdoor package could be something very legislatively, that would get good reception. but like brainstorming, like how to pursue it in terms of, you know, the Met Council has its own set of challenges, being under the governors, you know, so anything that is on behalf of the Met Council, you know, has to go through those approvals, whereas, you know, if it's something that's a collaboration of all the implementing agencies, like, so I would, you know, I'm just saying, like, I love this and I would be happy to help with, in terms of like, how to framing it and packaging it and getting, you know, something moving, cause I think that's something really cool that we could do.
Okay.
If I may build on your comment, I've always felt that maybe an appropriate place for this discussion is the greater MSP. You know, they talk about economic development of the region, but a huge part of economic development is workforce retention and recruitment, as well as business retention and recruitment. Again, it's a quality of life issue, and to me, that's the greatest path for success. The agencies, they're just providers, and it may be a combination of agencies and cities who want to take on these sort of things. You're right about the skating. We don't do it at our agency. We're kind of afraid of it because ice is never safe, you know, it's drilled into our heads. But you look at City Maple Grove, they have an ice skating path that they've built in their downtown. And I believe maybe Burnsville or some other cities have done that too. It's an incredible opportunity, not necessarily to be led by the council or by the agencies that would be supported.
And you know, let's open it out, Amanda, and we might get the words, because I think this has become an interesting thing relative to even how we talk about sauna and how that's growing, and there's something there, the park systems are figuring out it's a draw. And so again, this very particular idea, and maybe it's something, summer is easy, but even in terms of park usage and land usage and access for people with all abilities versus like, there's something for us to think about in the way that we use our parks as creatively in winter, for the benefit as we do in summer. And actually you all have been doing some, like even the star watching stuff, which is a really interesting thing about winters. You can do star watching better in winter because sunset is at 5, right? So it's something, again, there's just a particular way that we can begin to characterize kind of, you know, capital investments that enhance our kind of well-being, specifically because winter is such a significant part of life in Minnesota. And I think we could do some damage.
Okay. We have lots of areas where we'll talk more, but I think for today we can probably kind of wrap that up. Is that accurate? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Colin. We'll have more work to give you later.
Thank you so much.
We'll move into reports. I think I'll have 2 that I'll mention and then kick off to Emmett if he has more details about them. One is a few of you got reappointed, so that's cool. Say more about that if necessary. And then also I got an email from my Met Council subscriptions that there's a tree grant thing that just opened, and regional park agencies are one of the eligible applicant types, in addition to cities and counties and such. So if any of our park agency people have tree programs, apparently there's some money on the table. Other commissioners? Sue?
The Met Council approved the reappointment of council members that were up for reappointment, so they did that last week, and we're really glad to have that process completed. I would like to encourage you to keep an eye on what's going on in Washington. It was reported in the paper last night and today, that both papers last night and today, and other news organizations, that one of the cuts coming down is the closure of the visitor center for the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, which is located currently at the Science Museum, with hopes of a more permanent spot, but the national parks are very much part of the park system we support, and particularly MNRA. A lot of the parks that are treasures for this region are along the Mississippi. And whatever you're willing to do to reach out to your members of Congress as well as the White House to express your support for the MNRA Visitor Center, I'd really appreciate it personally. The legislation was passed creating MINRA 37 years ago. And albeit a small park agency with very few staff, the men and women employed here by the National Park Service do an important job and are just very much part of the metro region, so thank you. This will be my last IMPASC meeting. My colleague Wendy Wolf would be here tonight, except she's on vacation. We just went through some realignment on the council, and I'm going off the council when, I was gonna say if, but I'm not gonna use that word, when a replacement is picked, hopefully in the not too distant future. So I wanna just say how much of a pleasure it's been to be a part of these meetings, and thank you all. Our paths will cross again, because I may just decide to show up from time to time, so thank you.
You're welcome.
When you need somebody for a public comment, I'll be
Right.
happy to.
Perfect.
You'll be missed.
Thank you. Okay. Okay.
Thanks, everyone. I wanted to just start by thanking Sue. I am sad that this is Sue's last meeting. She has been very supportive and always available, and she represented this commission really well at the Community Development Committee and the council, so thank you. So there's that, and then I'll just mention that the legislative session continues. It is what I'd say an interesting session. Got off to a slow start, but they just took, and Amanda, correct me, usually there's 3 deadlines that you have to move through in order to get a bill into play. And I think they've just smushed them all together and made one, or there's 2 deadlines, okay. Do you know the dates offhand?
Yeah, April 5th and, let me pull it in.
Sorry.
No, I just put it in. Yeah, Friday, April 4th is the first, they're calling it the first and second committee deadlines, which means a bill has to get through both sides by that day. Usually first and second are separate days,
Yeah.
like it has to get through one body by one day and the other but they're doing it the same day. And this date is later than typical. And then the third deadline is April 11th, which is for bills that have a financial component to get through.
Thanks, Amanda, sorry for putting you on the spot.
No, I'm
But it is a really active session, and things are moving now. And I wanted to just say this is a big session for the regional park implementing agencies and council, with the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund in play, the Operations and Maintenance Fund in play, and a bonding bill. We don't have a acquisition ask right now, but we will next year. We're ramping up for that. And the agencies have brought an aquatic invasive species bill, which has heightened importance because the governor is proposing some cuts to the statewide aquatic invasive species funding, which I think it speaks to that this is a very tight budget year, and I think the February forecast will come out tomorrow in March.
today.
Or it came out today, okay.
It's not great.
And it's not
Not
great.
good.
I haven't heard anything yet.
Yeah, it got worse, so in the short term, for the next biennium that they'll be setting the budget for, there's about 450 million left on the bottom line.
Okay.
Which is 180 million less than it was in November. And then, for the next biennium, fiscal year 28-29, the deficit grew to almost 6 billion when it was 5.2 back in November, so. Little bit more dire, I guess.
Well, thanks for that, and so it's, you know, that sort of hangs over the session. I think all the legislators, from what I can garner, are guarded in terms of like their aspirations for this session because of the tight financial situation of the state. So, but it's proceeding and, you know, committees are meeting, people are working through issues, so I'm not overly optimistic, but I'm also hopeful that some things will happen this year, including a bonding bill, but
That it?
that's it.
All right. Well, with that, and speaking of winter activities and skating, there's a hockey game that just started. So I'm pretty sure we just lost all of our online viewers, and I'll let you go join them.
Thank you. Yeah.